Welcome to a special edition of the Bob Ryan, Jeff Goodman, Gary Tanguay along for the ride Zoom and podcast. We are here to celebrate the life and career of Bill Russell, who passed away at the age of 88 years old. Personally, for me, I will just say that, in my opinion, he is the greatest winner of all time. And I did have a brief interaction with Mr. Russell later in life. I had a chance to interview him a couple of times. And the thing that he always conveyed to me, that he wanted to be known as a man, as opposed to just an athlete. And I think that says all you need to know about if you were looking for one sentence to sum him up, that would be it. That's all I have to say. Now let's go to Bob Ryan. And Bob, of course, when did you start covering the Celtics, and when did you first meet Russ?
I met Bill Russell after his playing career ended, when he was coach of the Seattle Supersonics. My first year on the beat was 69-70, the year after Bill Russell retired, along with Sam Jones. And when he became coach of the Sonics, during the course of my travels, I encountered Bill Russell and found him to be friendly and charming, informative, and engaging, not companion, I shouldn't say, but interview subject. And I got to know him later on a little better when he was a broadcaster. And those days in the 80s is when I would interact a little more in various places with Bill Russell. Never to consider myself a friend. We can get into this with how Bill Russell defined friendship. But I was in the circle of acquaintances with whom he was compatible. And it was a very nice place to be. There are two ways to look at Bill Russell. And let's start with the off the field first. Bill Russell is a great American. He was given the Congressional Medal of Freedom by President Obama, and he deserved that, and long before Barack Obama became president of the United States, because he's one of the great Americans of the 20th and 21st century. Way above his athletic prowess,
right?
Bill Russell was a civil rights advocate and an advocate for human dignity and freedom. And the line that I would were I privileged to put the coda on his tombstone, I would put the quote that Bill Russell used frequently, which is, "My citizenship is not a gift, it is a birthright." And by that he meant, I do not need to have my privileges conferred to me by white America. I don't need that. I shouldn't have to have that. Because when I was born in America, in Monroe, Louisiana, in 1934 or 5, whatever it was, I was an American, and that's the way it should be. Well, we all know the reality, but that's the way he thought.
Well, and just your colleague Gary Washburn, I thought, had a great quote in the article he wrote tonight. He said, Bill, quote, "didn't give America a break for being slow to accept and embrace diversity and civil rights." And I thought that was very appropriate. It dovetails with what you're saying.
Exactly. No, I yield to any personally friendly Black American, which Gary is for me, or anybody that I don't know, and giving them the right to comment on Bill Russell and his place in American society and how he acted before I do. I'm speaking as a elderly white American who happened to have his acquaintance at times and who has observed the arc of his career. So thank you, Gary. I think that does augment what I just said, and that Bill Russell was in control of his life.
Yes.
And I think he backhanded racism. He was subjected to it. He was hurt and harmed and infuriated by it. But in the end, hey, screw you. That's Bill Russell. And he prevailed in his mind. And he died, I think, I would like to think, peacefully, in terms of the fact that he did everything he could to show the world, this racism thing is nonsense. It's stupid, and it isn't going to change me from being who I am. That was Bill Russell. That's the Bill Russell, the American citizen, the great American and a proud Black American.
Well, when I had a chance to interview him, that's when he returned to Boston, and they retired his number, and it was really to help his daughter's cause. His daughter was working with Big Brother, Big Sister, and I think
Yeah,
he did that to give her the publicity. He did it for her.
yeah.
He certainly didn't need it, and that's when it was a who's who at the Garden.
Oh,
Wilt was there. I mean, everybody was there, and I interviewed him, and he also said at the end, he said, "I am my father's son."
yes.
Which to me, he just wanted to be. He was more than a basketball player.
Oh.
And he did not want to be known as just a basketball player. He was a proud man.
Without question, that was, his career ended in 1969 when he was 35, going on 36 or whatever, 36.
Right.
And so that was 52 years ago, 53 years ago. So because the last game was May 5th, 1969. So he lived a complete life afterward, and he lived it in permanent and total dignity and assurance, and ASS, and the way he wanted to live it. He was in charge of his life in a way that few people are, black or white, frankly.
Well, and just to give people an idea, if they're not aware of the history books, when he and Red started together, Red, a Jewish American, Russ, an African American, both victimized by anti-Semitism and racism, would go into St. Louis, Kansas City, wherever, and they had to, and the hotels were segregated. And Red, I mean, this better than me, but Red would say, "No, we're all staying together. This isn't happening." Right? These are the types of things that he experienced, and then, of course, victimized by vandalism in his home. Here in Boston.
Worse than anything he encountered in segregated or semi-segregated America was what he encountered in Reading, Massachusetts, when someone broke into his house and smeared feces on his wall.
Yeah.
And this is the world he came into in Boston when he became a rookie here in 1956 in December, when he returned from the Melbourne Olympics with a gold medal around his neck, having won 2 championships in San Francisco and a gold medal in Melbourne, and now was the prize rookie of the Boston Celtics. And he encountered a Boston that was very different. I hope to God that we can say that Boston is today. And
sure.
He encountered racism, there's no question. And yet, unlike some of his confreres who yielded a little more, Russell just headed head on.
Right.
And headed head on. And he was Charlie. He always spoke about his father, Charlie. Yes. And now remember, here's Bill Russell's background. He was born in segregationist Monroe, Louisiana.
That's okay.
He's 88 when he died. He was born in segregationist Monroe, Louisiana. His father was part of the Great Migration, and in the Great Migration, in his case, was to Oakland rather than in the Midwest. There's many stories, history and books and great novels and stories about the Great Migration. His father was part of it, and he was part of it. So he grew up from age 8 on in Oakland and encountered whatever amount of racism was California would provide, but was certainly somewhat less stinging than what would have been available in Monroe, Louisiana. All right, but he adapted. It wasn't going to defeat him. It was never going to defeat him. He was going to give it the backhand. And I love that phrase, that description of his, which is citizenship is not my gift. It's a birthright. And by the way, white America was not going to define the gift, any privileges they were going to give me. I already had them. I don't need Whitey to tell me that I could do this or that, whether it was go to a lunch counter or vote or anything. That was Bill Russell's credo from forever. And he applied that to his daily life for the rest of his life, And
now to talk about Bill Russell, the player.
Yes.
The greatest winner of all time. You just mentioned 2 NCAA championships at the University of San Francisco, gold medal, and 11 NBA
championships in 13 years. During one of which he was hurt. I will, in 58. Right. I will give the Sixers an out. In 68, Billy Cunningham was hurt and did not play. And he was a very important component of the 68 Sixers, who the Celtics beat coming down from 3-1. So if you want to offset them, I'm not going to fight that. But we do know, documented, that he competed for 16 championships from 1955 until 69, 2 NCAAs, 1 Olympics, 13 NCAAs, and his teams won 14. And he was a prominent player on each of those 14 teams. That's an unmatched legacy of winning in North American sport history. I know I hear about Richard, Richard medals and all right, but he doesn't. But it doesn't. It's not 14. It's 11, I think. So anyway, he's, and so if I'm wrong about and I exaggerate, the fact is he was a documented great winner, the greatest in North American sports history to win games. And the other one is, and I love this one, and I'm proud of coming up with. I came up with this one, and which is that in 21 winner take all games, which means every NCAA game, because every NCAA game is win or lose.
Right.
Every medal round game in the Olympics, because you can get to the medal round having lost a game. But of course, 56, they didn't lose any games. But every medal round game and every NCAA best of 5 or best of 7. 21 times Bill Russell's teams faced elimination, and 21 times they won.
Yeah.
And so I submit confidently that's an unmatched legacy in North American sports history.
Well, let's talk about how he did it, because they did not keep track of the block shot, I believe, right?
No,
so
they did not.
What Tommy Heinsohn used to tell me often when he talked about Russell's game is, Russ may have 2 or 3 blocks in one possession, or to start the fast break, Russ knew where to tap the ball.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
So there you go. Now that would start the legendary Celtics fast break. So he was a defensive mastermind in that. And I always looked, when I saw the tapes, I mean, look, what did I know? I was born in 64. I just feel that Bill Russell could have scored more points if he wanted to, but he knew that wasn't the way to win the game.
You are correct. Now let's back up. There were occasional block shots before Bill Russell. Bill Russell made it an art form. Bill Russell showed the world what the effect of block shots could be. And unlike many of the modern youngsters who are showing off and knocking it into the 10th row and therefore giving another possession to the team that he has just blocked, Bill Russell often, I won't say every time because that's not true, but more often than not, and more often than anybody today would even consider, kept the ball in play after blocking it. Tom Heinsohn used to tell me, he called it, he would pop it somehow, and then retrieve it and then start the fast break.
Right.
That was the goal. His goal was not to show off that I can block a shot. It was to turn it into a positive for the team, period. And he did that. And now this is where, the Twitter world goes crazy. The youngsters go crazy. They don't know. They don't get it. I know they don't, and I understand they can't. I never saw Bill Russell. They don't understand. There's nobody today with that facility, with that mentality and facility combined. Nobody. So you may have a block shot. 90% of block shots today went up out of bounds, period. And that may or may not help the possession because the team may get the ball back and score anyway. Bill Russell did not do that as a rule. He tried to keep the ball in play. He was intelligent enough, agile enough, athletically incredibly advanced enough to manipulate that block shot into a positive asset for the fast break and not just a thing to knock out of bounds to show you, oh, boy, I blocked the shot. I know what I just said is going to be rejected by so many because they don't get it. You know why? Because he was sui generis. There's never been another Bill Russell. There have been a lot of wonderful big center. He was ahead of his time athletically, as he told me and others. He could he could kick the rim.
Oh yeah.
And he was a quick jumper. There's 2 kinds of jumpers: gatherers, or quick taper offers. He was the ultimate the quick taper offer without gathering. Wilt was a gatherer. Was a quick taper offer, but didn't get that high. But he was a quick taper offer. Larry was a quick taper offer.
Right.
Wilt, among others, was not. Anyway, Russell was. And it was an extraordinary, ahead of his time athleticism. Bill Russell high jump 6'9" with no technique, in college. It was, it's just, anyway.
But he was a genius in knowing the game. That's the thing. He was a genius when he really understood the game. He was a smart man.
My first year on the beat was 69-70, year after he and Sam Jones retired. The Celtics are floundering at 500 team middle of the season. And John Havlicek said to me, we miss him more in offense and defense, by the way. And they ran the offense around his passing.
Right.
They had a thing called the 6 play. Guess what? What was Bill Russell's number?
Oh, yeah.
Ask anybody who was there. The 6 play. And it had a variety of options. But it started because the ball went to Bill Russell. And he went from there. Now, you made an excellent point that I must amplify about how he could have scored. I urge you and anybody that I am proud to say that the Boston Globe, as we speak, has reprinted online the story that I was able to do with Bill Russell in 1999 on the occasion of that ceremony that you alluded to at the Boston Garden, where we finally got around to honoring Bill Russell properly. And I did the preview story sitting with Bill Russell at the Capitol Grill in Providence, Rhode Island for 3.5 hours, and him telling me every goddamn good story. And he gave me his A+ game. And what he was talking about was, I could have scored more. And I could have scored more and tried to score 20 points a game. That would have disrupted the flow and continuity of our offense.
No question.
And that wasn't my job. If I had to do that with a lesser team, now he's acknowledging he was with a very good team and he was, and that was able to take care of those other matters. But if it came down to they got to throw the ball to Bill more often to score, he could have scored. He had an excellent hook shot.
Yes.
He had excellent inside moves, a little turnaround jumper, but he didn't have to do that. That wasn't his raison d'etre. That's why the most points he ever scored a season was 18. And I guess his career totals around 15, 16. But that wasn't his job. When people today they look at the numbers, they're going to look at the numbers, and I understand. That's why you need to be able to explain to them what the deal was, what the life was. But John said we miss him more in offense and defense.
Right.
That opened my eyes at the time. Let me tell you, So yes.
Well, I've always found it frustrating when people say that he was a defensive specialist, and they allude to the fact because he wasn't good on offense. That was not the case. I mean, I can watch a million black and whites. I don't have to watch a million black and whites. I can watch 2-3 highlights, and I know that this guy could have scored whenever he wanted to.
He was a 20 points a game scorer in college.
But he could. It would have been. It wasn't even an issue. He could.
But it comes down to the fact that Bill Russell's object was winning the game.
There's no doubt.
And no one could figure out how to.
How about he and Wilt? To talk about that, he and Wilt, and Wilt could never get the. And Wilt won one title, right?
Against him.
Yes.
And he won one in LA after Russ retired.
Right.
When they first met, Wilt was a high school kid at Kutcher's Country Club as a bellhop, playing in those night games at Kutcher's, which is all you did in those days because there was nowhere else to play summer basketball. Russell was at the peak of his career. And so that's where they first met. And then Wilt enters the league in 1959 as the phenomenon. And Russell's already entrenched 3 years into the league. And immediately a rivalry ensues, naturally, because they were by far the two best centers. And first they were friendly. And there are legendary stories about Russell dining at Wilt's house in Philly before a Philly game and vice versa, Russ dining up here. And they stayed as frenemies for most of the 60s. And then when Wilt went to LA in 69, it changed. And famous 7th game in 1969 in the Forum, when Wilt got hurt a little bit, came out of the game, and Mel Counts came in and started hitting some shots. And Butch Barbadikov, who detested Wilt, wouldn't put him back in the game. And Wilt claims he wanted to go back in, and Barbadikov wouldn't put him in. And of course, the Celtics won that game by, and with the famous Nelson jump shot up and under. All right.
Oh yeah.
After the game,
the balloons in the rafters.
The balloons in the rafters. The balloon game. Russ went off a little far, and I don't know, it was not that night, but at some point in the aftermath, implied that he would have never come out of the game.
Right.
And indicted Wilt for coming out. And Wilt obviously didn't take well to that. And their relationship got frosty for X number of years. I do not know when they resumed, but I do know this. When Wilt died in 1999, at age 63, prematurely, frankly, Russell, about a month later, came to Boston, came to practice. And I went, and I was there, and I talked to him, and he told me that he and Wilt had reconciled, and were basically speaking. I do not remember he said once a week or once a month, but they were in contact. And I said, let me ask you something. Did you two think you were two members of an exclusive club? And he said, yes. Yes, I do. And that was his respect and honor, to put Wilt on that level with him, And if you look at what he once said, and it's in that story that I am alluding to, that I urge people to look at online on the Boston Globe from now on. It's out there right now. He said, when we first encountered each other, he said he was X points taller, 4 inches taller, X pounds heavier. He said, but I got to show up. That was right. And we all know that Russ neutralized Wilt as much as anyone ever did.
Right.
And had, did he have superior teammates by and large? Yeah. And he won those championships. But the psychology, he played Wilt psychologically in a way that no one else did. No one else did. Trust me.
Well, in one of the TV shows that you're not a fan of, Winning Time, Jason Clarke, who played Jerry West, tells the story to Magic how Julius was working him over. And he said, Russell used to invite Wilt over to dinner all the time and, and alluding to the fact that he would butter him up. I don't know if he did or he didn't. I think in the early 60s, like if you go from 61 to 66, I think you're right. The Celtics had the better team. There's no question. Wilt seemed to get a better roster around him with the Lakers, with Goodrich and West, and, with Baylor. That was in the late 60s, right? Late 60s, early 70s.
Yeah, it was 68, 69. But
yeah, so that's when Russ was going out.
Russell's last year. We didn't know, but it turned out to be his last year.
Right.
The Sixers roster in 66, 67, when they beat the Celtics in 5, was a great roster. No question about it. So that team, we give Wilt full credit. Wilt averaged 24 points, 24 rebounds, 8 assists. He altered his game. There's no question about it. But overall, one of the things that Russ would do overall, and I believe this is part of the mythology. You can either believe it or not believe it. Fine. Okay, fine. That there were nights in the routine regular season games back in the day, whether Wilt was in Philly or San Francisco or back in Philly with the 76ers, where Russ would let Wilt go around and maraud, the first 2-3 periods. Excuse me. Russ would dominate the first 3 periods.
Yeah.
Then with the Celtics, with the game in hand, would let Wilt accumulate stats in the fourth quarter.
Okay.
Fuck it. I don't care. I'll let him go and let him get the numbers. We're winning. That's it.
Yeah,
now you can take that or reject it. I think I think that's perfectly fitting with Russell's mental and emotional, capability. Not every night, naturally, but many nights, which helps account for Wilt's vast statistical superiority,
right,
in the rivalry. Wilt he averaged far more points, almost twice as many. Not twice as many rebounds, but definitely twice as many points. But that wasn't, as we already alluded to, wasn't Russell's role.
No, it was all about the rings. But it was the greatest picture ever, which we've seen everywhere, is Russ with all the rings, the 10 fingers, 11 rings. I mean, it's everywhere, and it's one of the best. But I want to talk also, when we get back to what Russ did, is as far as lifting off, as far as dealing with racism, and being a champion. He became the first African American coach in any sport.
Well,
at 60s, I mean, for 2 years he was a player coach.
John McLeod was actually hired by, of all people, George Steinbrenner in the American Basketball League in 1961. John McLeod coached the Cleveland Pipers, and the ill-fated ABL formed by Abe Saperstein, and the guy that hired him for the Cleveland Pipers was George Steinbrenner. Wow. So John McLeod was the first but that was a league that lasted a year and a half. And but it was, it was a challenge to the NBA that failed. But Russell became the first, existing prominent major sports league black coach.
NFL, Major League Baseball.
Yeah. But I want to make sure that we set the record straight, for John McLeod, who's a pioneer in basketball history, and give George Steinbrenner credit, frankly, but when Red hired Russ, it was the first time one of the major sports leagues of any kind had hired a black person. And Red didn't hesitate. There wasn't. It was a very obvious thing and a logical thing. And Russ, in the first year out, they don't win, and then they wins too. And Russ was the coach. I mean, it wasn't like Red was pulling the strings. Trust me on that. No. It was Russell's team, and Russell ran those teams.
Did he have to coach that? I mean, obviously you had a presence, but they had been together, and there was sort of a Celtic way. He
had a good veteran team, and they weren't good enough in '67, but they were in '68. And as I said, I'll give Philly credit for Cunningham being hurt. But you got veterans. Havlicek's coming into his prime. He's got Satch. He's got Nelly. He's got Sam. He's got KC. No, he doesn't have KC. He's got Siggy. He's got some players, and he's got himself. He's still playing. He's still himself. And let me tell you something. In 1969, after they finished fourth in the East in the four-team Eastern Conference, and the champion team was Baltimore Bullets, who had a great season.
Right.
And they went up and they beat the 76ers, and that was okay. Then they beat the Knicks, who had added DeBusschere and had DeBusschere and Reed and Bradley and Barnett, and he outplayed Reed. He outplayed him. He's 36 years old. He outplayed Reed to beat him to get there. That wasn't expected. That was. I mean, remember, this team finished fourth. They were in 48 games, and then they get to the finals, and the Lakers were the super team with West, Baylor, and Wilt. Although they hadn't had enough games together during the regular season due to injury to both Baylor and Wilt. But now they're there, and this is the super team. And, the Celtics win. First game, Jerry goes off for 53, and it gets 41. And they're down. By the way, the Celtics being the first team ever to come back from 0-2. They lost the first two in L.A., and then they came back and won 4 the next 5, and including the famous fourth game when Sam hit that jump shot that rolled around the rim. And then they won Game 7 in the balloon game.
Let's go ahead to an event I believe you were at, which was the first or the official retirement of his number.
Yes.
Right, from what I understand. Yes. Now, when I had the opportunity to interview Bill prior to the 99 event that we talked about, I said, well, what happened in 72? And he said, Red was after me. You got to retire your number. And Russ just said, look, we'll come in the morning. Just come, we'll do something, just the team. So you were there, right?
Yes. The only people that were there he was in town to broadcast. 74, as I recall.
Oh, 74, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Doesn't matter. But as I recall. And he was in town to broadcast, which was the occasion to get him in town. And the only people that were there were the Garden crew and the media.
Right.
And they hosted it. And Dick Rayfield, the late Dick Rayfield, the great photographer, had a picture. And Dick and I did a book on the Celtics later on. And he promised me that picture, which he guarded like it was, you can imagine, like the Gordian knot. He guarded it. He said it was going to be in the book. And he didn't put it in the book. He took it to his grave. Dick. Oh my God. But yeah, I was there. And it was like before a Celtic game with no fanfare, nothing.
Why do you think that was, Bob? Why do you think he wanted it that way?
That's trying to get inside the head of a complicated man. He had made that an issue, whether it was about Boston and the way he still felt about Boston by that time in 74. It couldn't have been against the Celtics per se.
No, well, see, I always wondered if it had something to do with that. We understand that the challenges he had dealing with racism in the city. I mean, we've talked about that, and we certainly could sympathize with what that man had to deal with. There's no doubt about it. But I always wondered if it was Bill Russell was such a team-oriented guy.
Mm.
You know, to him, anything less than a ring was just kind of foolish. That's what I thought.
The two things he did resisted, of course, were the Hall of Fame itself, which he thought was racist at that point.
Sure.
You know, he later accepted his induction, but this is different. You know, the Celtics themselves, God knows, could not be accused of treating him anything but as royalty. No, well, guess what? He took it to his grave.
Yeah, we'll never know. I just always thought of him as a team guy, and like individual accolades weren't his thing.
I was privileged to be there. Yes, I was.
That's pretty cool, though. That's pretty okay. Now, I want to wrap this up, or the next stage of his life is he was a very smart man, and he knew how to hold an audience when he chose to. He really could, boy. And I'll tell you, that AT&T commercial, the bell system, remember when he took the hook shot?
Yeah.
Right now, when I asked him about that, he said he made it on the first take.
I won't argue.
No, me neither.
I won't argue.
And that laugh of his laugh during the broadcast became like his signature. Because that's what I fell in love. You know, 75, I'm 11 years old. 74 is the first Celtic team I really remember is 74. And then, you know, he's doing all the games. You know, Mendy Rudolph, Pat Summerall, Musburger, Russ. And that laugh during the game was just infectious. He was really, when he chose to be, he could really be a showman.
You could not ask for a more charming person to spend an evening with than Bill Russell when he wanted to turn on that charm.
Yeah.
No, you couldn't. And I was witness and privileged subject to that more than once, but certainly that night in Providence in 1999 when I did that interview, 3.5 hours, closing up the Capitol Grill, and that cackling. Oh no, but it was all up to him if he's going to turn on that charm or not.
Yeah,
but it was there. It was there.
He and Red, right?
Yeah,
we need to cover that because when they talk about Belichick and Brady, and we all know how that ended. But Russell and Red, just a special relationship.
Red, when I once was unbelievably privileged to do an interview on behalf of CBS, sitting at midcourt at the Boston Garden with those two. It's out there somewhere, you know. And he made it categorically clear that he never would have been the player that he became in the NBA if he hadn't played for Red. That Red appreciated what he had to offer and how to get the best out of him. That he could never have, no ways win 11 championships anywhere else, ever. He made that clear. And of course, you know, Red was eternally grateful. You know, he didn't win a championship until Russell showed up, you know, period. And he knew that and he appreciated it. Now they had and Russell wrote a book about, you know, friendship and Red and him. Russell was a subject with several books, fascinating, all worthwhile reading. But yeah, he and Red, absolutely. And he appreciated Red's posture about the blacks going back to Chuck Cooper. Red didn't have to apologize for anything in Russell's eyes. That Russell believed that Red was an equal opportunity, you know, friend and employer.
And Red had experienced it with anti-Semitism. I mean, that's they had that bond. Like, you know, Red could sit there and say, kind of, dude, I've been there, you know, and I think that meant a lot. I also there was a great companionship there. So and real quick, Bob, because we could go on for hours here. The other part of Red that I love and how he handled Russell is, from what I understand, Russell goes, I'm not practicing today. Red would go, fine. Russ would sit and read the paper.
Red was famous for treating players individually.
Right.
He didn't treat them all alike. This wasn't Vince Lombardi. This wasn't Vince Lombardi. Okay. No. Russell got special treatment, and Red approached Heinsohn differently. Then he approached Sharman. Then he approached Cousy. Then he approached Ramsey, and Russell got his deal. And when Russell, it was known he wasn't going to overplay Russell back-to-back games or anything like that. Then he was going to sit and practice. And when he was coach, even he was known for player coach. He was known for sitting there reading the paper, and Wayne or Siggy or somebody else would run their drills, and they knew Russ would be there when he needed him. Yes, true. It's not a world that you can comprehend today. All right, you can't. It doesn't exist, but it did. That's the way it worked.
Bob, thanks for doing this tonight. Bill Russell, just arguably the greatest player of all time. You can debate forever whether it's he and Jordan. I'm not going LeBron. Some people may go LeBron. I'm not going LeBron. But Russell's the greatest winner of all time. He was a great American. He was a great man. He was so much more than an athlete, which I know he wanted. That was important to him. And 88 years well lived.
I'll sell it this way. I don't want to get into the greatest player of all time. He's the greatest NBA figure of all time.
Right. Yep. Agreed. Right. Bob, you're going to be busy. Everybody in the world's talking to you. Thank you, my friend. We'll see you soon.
You got it.